The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and reporters and editors and all different people who are putting things out in the Bronx so that you can find out what's kind of in their heads. What are they thinking about? Second segment today, we often do artists and photographers and filmmakers, and we have one of the world's great jazz musicians going to join us in our second segment. So hang around for that at least. But nonetheless, right now, I am real thrilled to have Reuven Blau, who's a reporter for The City. People may know him also previously from the Daily News, the Post, and the Chief Leader. He's also got a book coming out about our subject today. Nice to have you with us, Reuven.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about the latest there.
The latest, let's see, the article that caught my eye, and really it's a topic we really need to talk about, is Rikers Island. I guess we'll start with the headline, City Jails Scrap Last Remnants of Pricey Consultant Plan as Deaths Mount. A fifth person this year died behind bars, and there you can see people who rallied at City Hall just a week or two ago. I don't even know where to begin, Reuven. What is going on at Rikers? I guess your story really talked about the whole idea of oversight, and maybe the city finally needs to admit that they can't take care of Rikers.
Yeah, it's really at a turning point right now. They've had oversight. They've had a federal monitor, basically in charge, or kind of overseeing the department for about a little over 6 years. And the monitor essentially collects a lot of data, makes a lot of recommendations, and essentially issues these reports, a few a year. And it's just been this steady drumbeat of it's getting worse, it's getting worse, it's getting worse, it's getting even worse. And de Blasio came in office and said, "Hey, look, I didn't realize how bad this was. We're going to make this a focus, and we're going to actually, kind of address this."
I just have to interject there. I'm a New Yorker. I'm not the mayor of the city of New York. I didn't know how bad it was. Interesting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I think a lot of people,
who doesn't know how bad it is at Rikers?
You're somebody who's who's well read, and is also somebody who's in the DNA of the city, and saying that. And I think that is exactly it kind of really brings to focus what people are talking about when it comes to the shutdown plan, which is, hey, Rikers Island is this place by the East River. It's out of sight, it's out of mind. And a lot of people are not aware of of kind of the horrors, the daily horrors that go on there, and the problems that they've been facing. I think that's part of one of the big reasons why there's a plan to kind of bring this back into New York City, into kind of the boroughs where they're closer to the jails, and it's actually easier access. But that's I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit of why.
So let me just ask you, do you believe we need a consultant or a federal takeover or something? Or do you believe in somehow, and of course, Mayor Adams has indicated he'd like to deal with this himself. Do we need that? Is that what the problem is? Because now we have consultants that are not working out either.
It's a really great question, and it's loaded in many ways.
It is loaded.
I will tell you this, I can't kind of give you a yes or no answer, but I will tell you this. I've been covering Rikers Island, different capacities, or DOC, the City Department of Correction, for close to 20 years. I will say that there've been problems. It's getting worse. There's a lot more attention on it. And the city has come up with plan after plan after plan. Each new commissioner usually comes in and says, we're going to change things around. Most recently, there was a commissioner under de Blasio who had a 14-point plan, didn't work. There has been multiple attempts to sort of turn this around that have not worked. And I think that the advocates who are saying that there needs to be a receiver, a federally court appointed receiver, which has been threatened now recently, they say, look, this is the only thing that can actually turn things around. And a receiver would have the ability to kind of change the rules that currently exist, that kind of, some have argued, a handcuff reform and handcuff changes that need to be done. So, I mean, I can just tell you what the history has been, and it's been a lot of terrible things happening, and the costs have gone up, and in some stretches, the number of people there has gone down. I think it costs more to house somebody in Rikers Island than to send someone to an Ivy League school. It's not the
Which
answer.
is kind of remarkable. If you look at what I think people know about, especially in the Bronx, and we've had such controversy over, where they're going to site the replacement jails, that one that is now geared for in the South Bronx. Um, I read an article, and I can't remember where I read it. I'm sorry, where they said, you know what, maybe this is a way to ultimately deal with it. Now, that's not an immediate solution, and when people are suffering, you certainly want immediate solutions. Do you think that the plan to break up Rikers Island is the right plan, even though it doesn't solve our problems right now?
I think it addresses a few major concerns that nothing else will do on Rikers Island. One is this phenomenon called bullpen therapy, which is essentially people now are woken up at 3, 4 in the morning to get to their court dates. They're dragged to court. They sit in a bullpen cell, sometimes usually for hours and hours, given a bologna sandwich or some type of other like tuna fish sandwich, and then dragged back to Rikers Island. It's costly, it's inefficient, and in some forms, like advocates will say, it's like somewhat torturous, and it actually kind of is used to persuade people to plead out their cases because it's just such a torturous sort of cycle.
And by the way, that makes it even worse. And we know the stories of people who claim to be innocent, and they're there for interminable amount of time. It's almost like a further insult to injury, so to speak, that this
Absolutely,
is the way they're
absolutely.
treated.
And the only way to address that is by building the jails closer to the courthouses. Now, in
Mhm.
many cases, and in Brooklyn and Queens, there's pre-existing places. Obviously, the Bronx is not that, and Staten Island has been excluded from the plan, largely because of political reasons. But one thing I will say is that there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of coverage about the community response to this and fears of the community. Historically, the fears that the community is raising have not been an issue. Downtown Denver built a gigantic jail there. Real estate prices not suffered. The neighborhood safety not been an issue
Oh,
at all.
that's it. That's fascinating. That's interesting to know.
And it's not the only place that this has been the issue.
But
Downtown
but
Brooklyn has been the same case,
just
right?
to
Real estate prices there are a fortune still.
just to defend advocates in the Bronx, they've been through so much, and they've seen so much stuff dumped in their neighborhoods, from peaker plants that destroy our children's lungs and everything else. So even if what you say may be provable, I can understand why people in the Bronx are saying, "Oh yeah, instead of a school, instead of a health facility, we're getting a jail." I can understand that. But just back to Rikers, and one of the things that I noticed, there was a trip. Apparently, the mayor went to visit Rikers Island, and he did not visit with inmates. I thought that was unfortunate and somewhat instructive because, after all, yes, I understand. He comes from the blue suit and he had blue skin, but he's now the mayor of the whole city, and that includes people who are incarcerated in Rikers Island. And understanding where they're at, and maybe even tearing some heartstrings at them, probably wouldn't have been the worst thing. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, it's a touchy situation when you go down
Mhm.
there, especially because a lot
Have
of
you been there, by the way?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times what people will do is, they see an opportunity to kind of plead their case, get some type of special, attention. And, it's a difficult place. And sometimes it's a distraction, it's difficult for staff to kind of deal with that. And then a lot of times, when there is conversations among, with the mayor or somebody that high up, it's kind of very staged. Like, they'll still very specifically bring out people who they know won't necessarily, kind of rock the boat too much. And there's areas, frankly, that aren't very safe, even for someone on the outside to be walking around.
Right, and you're certainly we would never, ever wanna put the mayor of the city of New York in any sort of, danger. Listen, we could break down any number of these issues. I mean, the solitary confinement, that was fascinating that the mayor came out, and not wanting to end it or adjust it. I mean, there are, the pictures of the solitary cells are pretty horrifying. Um, I do wanna mention that you are the co-author with, Graham Raymond of an upcoming book on the oral history of Rikers Island. Just talk to me about some of that stuff that is relevant to now. In other words, through that, can I assume we can see how we got to where we are?
Absolutely. It was a really fantastic project that I've been kind of part of and very proud of. Graham, who I've worked with at the Daily News, and I interviewed about 130 people, just everybody, officers, detainees, clinicians, former commissioners, you name it, people who've gone through the system and have shared their stories about different issues like, the food to gangs to some of the history. And we got, I've been covering this for a while and was just amazed by some of the stuff that people were telling me
Wow.
and, telling us, and just some incredible stories,
Mhm.
about their experiences. And I'm just really, really kind of excited about kind of sharing that with the public. The book's coming out in January, so we're kind of still finishing up the editing process, but really, it was something we spent, a few years working on.
Congratulations. I mean, it's a story that needs to be told. I certainly hope the book does well. I'm kind of smirking here because we were going to wrap up this segment, and I'm just so tempted to ask you, as I guess as foremost authority that we could find. What do you think? What should we do? I mean, are we going for a federal receivership? Your story was about, let me just get the name, James Austin, that was revising the system, a consulting group, McKinsey and Company. What do you think we need to do? And I don't know if I'm not pinning it on you, but I'm
Yeah.
curious.
I mean, how much time do we have? I'm kidding. There's a lot that needs to be done. I think, I'm a layman. I've not necessarily worked. I've covered it for quite some time. I haven't kind of been on the ground working. But I can tell you this. I can tell you that there are, serious, serious problems that need to be addressed. And it's not just saying, hey, we're going to change this. Like, here we have a plan. It's coming up with the right plan, the right execution, and sort of getting everybody on board. And it's a really tricky kind of road to follow.
Yeah. And
It's
one of the other things which we haven't talked about is the criminal justice system itself, which, the questions about bail and bail reform. I mean, that's another half-hour show. So, it's fascinating. I what can I tell you? I mean, the other thing that disturbs me is corrections officers. We don't want them to be endangered, and they're at much, I hate to put it this way, at war in there, mano a mano as anybody else, and that's absolutely not appropriate. And then they turn into, some kind of, that it affects them psychologically. It's just a mess. Anyway, so Reuven Blau from the city, we appreciate your time. We are certainly going to check back with you as things happen, and especially, I mean, I hate to wait till January, but when the book comes out, do we have a title yet? By the way?
just Rikers and oral history.
Rikers and all history. All right, listen, we're going to check back with you. We certainly appreciate your expertise and your experience in covering one of the most troubling places in the Bronx, frankly. So thank you so much. Say hello to all our friends at the city.
Will do. Thanks for having me.
Folks, we will take a short break, and we are really going to switch gears from what you just heard to one of the great jazz saxophonists and clarinetists of all time, and he's going to be performing in the Bronx, and that's why we're going to have Victor Goines with us in just a moment. Don't go away. All right, welcome back to the Bronx Buzz. Now I have a smile on my face. That Rikers Island segment was not very smile deriving, but right now I'm going to introduce you to two great people. One of my favorite people in the Bronx is Susan Olsen, who's the Director of Historical Services at Woodlawn Cemetery and Conservancy. Nice to have you with us, Susan.
Good to be here, Gary.
And he's got the drum roll. I want a drum roll to introduce one of the world's great saxophonists and clarinetists, and it's Victor Goines. And so maybe we'll start this way. Susan, why would Woodlawn Cemetery and Conservancy be in an interview with one of the world's great jazz players?
Well, let me tell you how all this started, Gary. Many, many, many years ago, we were awarded a grant from the History Channel for students to write biographies. So we went to the Lehman High School for American Studies. And I had just met Victor Goines after he had done a tribute to Illinois Jacquette, who's buried here. And I called him up and I said, do you think you can talk to students about writing biographies through music rather than through words? So Victor came to the high school, did a fantastic presentation. And then as time passed a little while longer, and the more we studied jazz here at Woodlawn, we realized that several of the people that Ellington wrote portrait pieces are buried here. Florence Mills, Burt Williams, and Coleman Hawkins. And so the idea came back again. Now, this is several years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And so I approached Victor again, who always brought Victor Goines and friends here to play. We've had mixed groups throughout the years. It's been delightful. And I said, Victor, do you think you could write the Woodlawn Suite, a series of biographies? Now, besides being a great musician and educator, Victor is a terrific composer. And I've attended several of the pieces he's done for jazz at Lincoln Center. And they're real toe tappers. Many people are afraid of jazz because it's too inspirational. But when Victor Goines writes a song or writes a piece, it's something that you could follow and it's something that you remember. So the Woodlawn Conservancy asked him if he would compose the Woodlawn Suite. And that, of course, was pre-COVID, and then none of us could get together. So now we're ready to have everybody out to Woodlawn for the suite.
So Victor, thank you, first of all, for joining us. I know you're in Chicago right now, and we appreciate you taking a moment. When you are presented with a concept like write the Woodlawn Suite, how does that translate in your mind to what you ought to compose or create? Seems to me, I would just be walking around singing, no, the Woodlawn Suite, the Woodlawn Suite, and I'm not getting anywhere. But tell me a little bit about what went into the creation of this that's going to be debuted. Let's just get it right. June 5th at the Woodlawn Cemetery. Go ahead.
Right. Well, thanks for having me here and to speak about this. And I think the first thing that comes about is to understand the history of Woodlawn and so much is going on there and as much as you can. So Susan is the perfect person for that because she knows all that is Woodlawn, literally. So my introduction to Woodlawn obviously comes through Duke Ellington, Illinois Jacquette, then goes through Jackie McLean and George Wein and so many other people. But then as you look further, you think about all of the other people that are there. Madam C.J. Walker, you have the Redcoats that are represented there. You have other Duke Ellington alums. You have the swing dancers, the Frankie Mann. You have the whole suffragist movement taking place there. You have the Latin Quarters. So you have Irving Berlin. You have Tin Pan Alley. So I'm kind of giving you some hints to all of the titles that are going on in this suite.
So you use those names and your knowledge of their music in your mind. As you said, this will be a gift, a way of recognizing that volume of great American music.
Yeah, because they represent so many different things and their way of life, while it has a lot of similarities in it, it has a lot of differences in it. So you can exploit the similarities through jazz, but you can actually highlight their differences in the different avenues that they took along the way. You take Irving Berlin's music, it's obviously Tin Pan Alley, but at the same time, that music became a very, very important part of what we call jazz standards today. So all of those things can become a part of the music. If not in their original sense, I won't be using their music, but I can use different elements of it. I can use different what we call contrafacts. I could write things based upon their harmonic knowledge of it. Or, we have the whole the thing of the Latin part of it, then obviously we have a rhythmic component that's taking place, just like we're having a swing dance. It's going to be trying to swing as hard as possible.
Sounds like this was a labor of love for you.
I'm still loving labor.
Susan, we're going to do history for you and history also about Victor. How did Woodlawn Cemetery become the place for all these jazz musicians? If I recall previous conversations you and I have had, it was the fact that the Duke was buried here, and then at that point it exploded. Of course, Miles Davis. So you really are the historian. I don't want to impose any of my crazy ideas.
We actually have two jazz sections in the southwest corner of the cemetery where W.C. Handy is buried. That is one section. And of course, when Handy, who was one of the most famous people in the world, bought his lot at Woodlawn when his wife died, that's when people started, members of the Clef Club, a lot of the black musicians of the time period started gathering around Handy. But internationally, the jazz corner that we celebrate is where Duke Ellington is buried. We only have two pre-planners in Woodlawn's history as far as jazz musicians. One is Duke Ellington, the other is Victor Goines. Jazz musicians are incredibly superstitious.
Oh, really?
They all want to be buried as close to Duke as possible.
Oh,
And that's the last request. And what's incredible about our jazz corner is none of them are New Yorkers. They just want to be buried together.
I recall Lionel, you could face Duke Ellington's grave and Lionel Hampton just to the left. And if I remember correctly, you told me that's why he's buried there. So Victor, just, we're going to rewind the clock. When did somebody put that instrument, I guess it would be a saxophone or a clarinet, in your hand and you said, oh, I like this? At what point did you become a musician and then, of course, dedicate your life to it?
Right. Well, I started playing the clarinet at 8 years old, and it was my mother who put the instrument in my hand. But it wasn't so much for artistic musical terms. It was because I'm asthmatic, and she thought that playing a wind instrument would help me with my respiratory issues, and it did.
I have to applaud. I'm sorry. I think that's great, and what a great lesson it is for Bronx children who, of course, unfortunately lead the world in asthma.
Yeah. Well, it also says that you can overcome anything. You just got to put your mind to it, and you got to follow the lead of those people who you trust, which was my mother at that time.
Mm-hmm. How rare is it for you to create a piece like to be conscripted to say, hey, why don't you create the Woodlawn Suite? Was this a unique thing for you? Because otherwise, I'm just assuming that you just compose and create your music. Or was this the kind of thing that you do all the time? Somebody said, hey, why don't you make a piece for us?
Well, I love doing it. I certainly don't do it as often as I would wish to do it.
Really?
One of the first pieces I had a chance to do was a commission through Jazz at Lincoln Center called The Jazz Age. It was for the Jazz Age, and the piece is called Untamed Elegance. And another one was a piece that I composed for Branford Marsalis. And I say a piece, these are both suites that I'm talking about. The suite for Branford Marsalis was called Crescent City. I had a lot of direction that I can make for that one to write about anything I wanted. The first one, Untamed Elegance, was specifically about the Jazz Age. So again, the historical component of it is always very important to me. Even as I'm from New Orleans, I did a lot of research on New Orleans and the traditions that took place way beyond my recall. I'm not really a historian, but I love this.
That's why we brought Susan into the room.
Susan is the historian, truly the historian. So that's how that came about.
So Susan, let's just make sure everybody knows. So it's June 5th at the Woodlawn Cemetery. Now, do you enter on Jerome Avenue or do you enter?
We recommend you come in on the Jerome Avenue. The gates close at 4:30 traditionally, but we're opening the gates at 4 o'clock for our concert goers. Bring your picnic. No alcohol, please, but we want you to come with your blanket, sit on the lawn. We will have our trolley here. We'll be taking folks to Jazz Corner prior to the concert. And then during the concert, have your snacks. And it starts at 5 p.m.
Wow. And Victor, is the Woodlawn Suite, is that all you're going to do? In other words, that's the whole thing? Or is that going to be a section of what you're planning to do?
No, it's going to be all the Woodlawn Suite. It's going to be all new compositions.
Wow.
Musicians from various backgrounds. We have a very diverse orchestra. I didn't want it to look like any one organization that I've worked with.
How big an orchestra?
It's going to be an 18-piece group.
Oh, I was looking up some videos of you, and I saw you with little quartets, and I was like, well, that's just incredible. But this is really going to be exciting. Do you bring a conductor, or do you kind of run the show from your spot with your sax and clarinet?
Well, one thing I've learned as an educator is when you think you run something, you never do. So,
Especially with talented musicians, right?
right. So the conductor of our jazz band is always the orchestra, is a former student of mine, in this case named Aaron Kimmel. But we'll all be playing together. And that's the thing about jazz music. It's a collaborative effort. So we'll all be very in tune with each other. And while the conductor is always great to have in front in the event of, needing to direct certain thing that's going on, we'll all be very informed about the music. We'll be well prepared.
How exciting. Susan, let's just have this in context. What else is going on at the Woodlawn Cemetery? Now, I know you have...
Well, right now we're preparing for Memorial Day.
Yes.
Yes. We had a fabulous Gilded Age tour. We've been watching that TV show, and everyone in the show is buried here at Woodlawn. So that's been really fun to do Gilded Age things. And of course, we're getting ready for the Summer Youth Employment Program. We'll have a group of young rising seniors and juniors from the Bronx out here working all summer long, which we're looking forward to them.
As you know, I was there. I've seen the graduations, which are just incredible. Woodlawn Cemetery and Conservancy, one of the most wonderful and important places in the Bronx. So, Director of Historical Services, Susan Olsen, thank you for joining us. And Victor Goines, where I'm from, we say rock on. I don't know if we say that in the jazz world. But you listen, man, you are just great. And we just need, I'm hoping a lot of parents will bring their kids. The kids got to see this live jazz in the Bronx. Oh my goodness.
Now, Gary, you tell them to keep swinging. It's all
swinging.
about.
All right, there we go. Keep swinging.
That's jazz.
You said what the great CT said, keep on keeping on.
Keep on. All right, fair enough. Victor, thank you so much. We are looking forward to having you swing the Bronx Saturday, June 5th. And for more information, by the way, you go to woodlawn.org. Is that what we're doing?
We recommend you make your reservations through woodlawntours.org.
Woodlawn Tours, TOURS, woodlawntours.org. We're going to put that on the screen. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Gary. Good to see you.
Thank you.
That's why this is what makes the Bronx the most beautiful place in the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will do it for the Bronx Buzz. It was difficult in the first segment, but important, and obviously happy and important in our second segment. And we'll do more next week. Good night.